Hi everybody, it's Marcy from Chunky Knitted Creations again today with a wonderful tutorial for you. Guess what we're going to do today, Chunk? What? We are going to do a graph blanket. I've had lots of requests in the Chunky Yarn Blanketeers group for me to do a video to show everybody the basics of doing a graph blanket. So this is what our graph looks like. This is a simpler pattern of a flower, so there's not a lot of color changes in it. So when you print your graph out, it'll be numbered up and down the sides, telling you, how many stitches you need and that. I am going to cut to my computer here in a second and show you on screen exactly what this graph is all about and what you get if you come to our group and purchase one from the girl that does the graphs for everybody in our group. She does them for like $4, super cheap, and she can do just about anything. You can also just buy graph paper of your own from the craft store and just color in your picture and make sure that it stays on the lines and number it and just figure out your blanket size from there. Again, I'll explain that more in the next section of the video where I show you on the computer like what all comes on a graph. So let's get to the computer. I'll explain that, and then we'll come back and we will knit a graph blanket. Okay, everybody, this will be the screen recorder section that I was talking about in the intro. I just thought it'd be easier to show you the graph on my computer rather than trying to hold up a piece of paper in front of my face. So this is what you will get if you join Chunky Yarn Blanketeers and you purchase a graph from our graph person, which will be noted in the group. If not, you can make your own graph by simply getting some graph paper from the store and kind of just fill them in the boxes like this. When you are doing a graph blanket, you have to look at every box as if it are a stitch on your blanket. So if you see across the bottom here, I'm going to zoom in a little for you, it is labeled from left to right, number 1 through 20. So that means your cast on chain is going to be 20 stitches. Not 20 inches wide, because as you know, if you cast on 20 and you measure it, it's going to be a lot bigger than that. Usually a good formula to use is to times your cast on stitches by about 1.7 is what I've been coming out to lately. So anywhere between 1.5 and 1.7, depending on how tight or how loose that you knit. As I said in my previous video, if you don't want the end of your blanket to curl up and you're making a blanket, I would say on a 20 stitch blanket like this one, you want your cast on stitches to be about 2.5 to 3 finger widths. So when you're pulling through your loops, make sure you can fit about 2.5 to 3 fingers through it. Anything bigger than 20 cast on stitches, if you're doing like 25 and up, I would do at least 3 fingers. So that way you have nice big loose cast on stitches, gives your blanket room to expand and grow into it, and that will tighten up as you go. Okay, enough about that. So 20 cast on stitches wide, and I already kind of started my blanket. I'll show you that in a minute. And it did measure, I believe, 32 inches. I'll have to double check that. And then up the side of this graph, you can see the numbers 1 through 34. So I asked the graph person, Dawn, to make this a little bit of a smaller graph for me just for teaching purposes. So it is going to be 34 rows long, which means to me is actually going to be about 34 inches because the way I knit, and you do want to knit kind of tight, not super tight and not loose, just a medium, knit where there's not any gaps or holes in between when you're doing a graph blanket because you want your picture to look clear. So 34 rows long is going to be about 34 inches long. So right now we're looking at a blanket, if we just knit what is in front of us, we're looking at a blanket about 35-ish by 35, okay? So that's a square blanket, and I personally don't like my blanket square. I guess it depends on what you're using it for. So you can add to this. So I actually started knitting this blanket, and I used like 5 rows of purple and 5 rows of the gold that's in here. And then when I get to the end of this, after I hit row number 34, I'm going to add 5 more rows of purple and 5 more rows of gold, just to make it, you know, like another, what's that, 20 more, 5, 10, 20 more rows. So add another 20 inches to it. So I will end up about 35 by 54-ish. Okay, so when you get this, you're also going to get this wonderful line by line instructions. So if you look at this, it tells you, actually, let's go here first. These are written instructions in case you don't want to use the color chart, if you want to use different ones. But she's showing you here that she based this using this type of yarn in these colors. Okay, of course, for me, I'm only going to use my own brand yarn once I get all of my colors launched. But for this one, I happen to have this brand in these colors on hand, so I'm going to use exactly what's here. So she used Bernat Blanket Big, which you can buy at Michael's, Vintage, and Amethyst and Gold. And then again, let's go back to the color blocks. So your first row is going to be 20 stitches of the vintage color, which is like an off-white. You're actually 1, 2, 3, your first 5 rows, if you look here on your flower, they're just basically blank. So because you want some space around your picture, you know, you don't want it to come right to the end of the edges of the blanket. So again, you can eliminate some of these if you're going to add your own colors. I actually took off 3 rows of the vintage and just reduced it down to 2 so that my blanket wouldn't be so big. So now it's going to be, what did I say? I don't know, deduct a few, but I said it was earlier. I'll write the final dimensions in the comments. So I added 10 rows of color before this, and then took off a few rows of the solid white, vintage white color. So you're going to start knitting. If you want to knit exactly what's on here, just knit away. Please only use the knit stitch, especially when you're starting out. When you're doing graph blankets, you really don't want to you know, try like any different stitch, just because it's not going to look the same. You don't want to try to cable it in the middle. I have done some cross blankets where I did the cross itself in a herringbone stitch, and that came out pretty nice. So if you want to try that on something that's straight, you know, like you know, something square shaped, but nothing like a flower, you're just going to want to use the knit stitch. You can try purl, but again, not sure how it's going to turn out because I've never done that. So we are going to start knitting our first row. Let's go back to this color blocks. Our first couple of rows of white, it's 20 stitches wide, so we're going to do 20 white all the way across till you do anywhere between the 2 and 5 rows that you want to do. But if you're following the instructions on here and you want to make it just like what's on here, just so it's not so confusing, knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of just the vintage white. Then when you get to your 6th row, that's when you're going to start your pattern. And you can see she's got 9, 2, 9. Okay, she's telling you 9 rows of vintage white, or 9 stitches, I'm sorry, of vintage white, 2 stitches of the amethyst, and 9 stitches, more stitches of the vintage white. So if you get over here, you can see that's this first row right here, row number 6. And it is going to go from right to left, okay? And she even has that written here. Row number 6, right to left, okay? So that you know that you're going in the right direction, and just cross these off with your pencil as you knit. You know, you've knitted all these up here now, cross them off. And then after you knit this row, cross it off, okay? You can always reprint this. She's going to email it to you or send it through Messenger so you can print it. Or you can follow it on the computer if you want to. So you're going to knit right to left. So wherever you do, if you do what I did and you take off some rows here, just make sure when you start your actual flower that you are on the right hand side and you're knitting from right to left. And when I show you on my video, it might look different because the screen, if the screen doesn't flip or mirror, it might look like I'm going left to right. But it's actually, you want to make sure you start on the right with your blanket, or with your graph part with the actual picture. And then the next one is 8, 4, 8. So if you look at the picture of the flower, row 2 has 4 stitches of purple. So you're going to be going left to right on this one, and you're going to go 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches of the vintage white, and then 4 of the amethyst, and then 8 more of the vintage white. And then look, you can already tell the next row is going to be the same thing, but it's going to be going from right to left because you're on row number 8, and I bet it's going to say the same 8, 4, 8. Okay, yep, 8, 4, 8, but going in the opposite direction. When you get to row number 9, as you can see, it gets a little more difficult. Let's go back to it, row number 9, okay, and she's got the number on the side that you're going to stitch from, so row number 9 is probably left to right. Let's see. Yep, left to right. She even numbers it on that side for you, so you know when you get to that row, you should be stitching on this side of the paper, you should be stitching on that side of your blanket. So left to right, and you're going to go 4 vintage, 3 purple, 1 vintage, 4 purple, 1 vintage, 3 purple, 4. Okay, so you're going to have to cut and burn your yarn. Let's see, you're going to start off with white, and then you're going to cut and burn into purple here. So 1, and then again here, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to purple here, 5, 6 times you're going to have to cut and burn just for 1 row. So remember that when you start off doing these graph blankets and you're going to attack this really hard one with all, kinds of color on here, you're going to have to be doing a lot of cutting and burning. And as you can see, when you get to row 10, it's not that much because it's so solid purple all through here. And that one should be right to left because the 10 is over here on the right. So let's go, row number 10, yep, right to left. 3 vintage white, 14 of the purple, and 3 of the vintage white. Sorry, the purple, I keep calling it purple, but it's actually amethyst. And you can use winter grape that they have, because I think Bernat changed it. It used to be amethyst, and now it's winter grape, or vice versa. I just remember doing a blanket, and I bought both and didn't realize it until I saw it in the sunlight that half my blanket was a different dye lot. I thought it was a different dye lot, but it was a different color. So they're pretty close, but you can tell a difference when you use the two. So we're going to just knit away. I'm going to switch over to my camera now so you can see me actually knitting the blanket, and we'll do a few rows together, and then I'll pause it and I'll come back and show you the end result. I mean, you're going to cast off just like you would any other blanket, so it'll be like my beginner blanket tutorial. You're going to do the same thing. And again, if you for some reason you want to do your own graph, it's still going to be basically the same. I would set it up just like this so that, you can see. Just, number your numbers on the right and left like that. If you don't want to write out the color chart, you don't have to. But these are just so great for beginners. Dawn she does an amazing job on these. And she can graph you just about anything that you want. And she can make it bigger. You just tell her, say, I want it to be 40 wide by 60 long, okay? And she understands that means, 40 stitches. So you have to know when you're telling her 40 stitches wide, times that 40 by 1.5 or 1.7, that's going to be a pretty big blanket. But if you have a big picture that you want done, like a logo or something, you're going to need to do a blanket that big, and it's going to take you some time. But it'll definitely be worth it in the end. I'll try to remember to drop a picture of my Rudolph blanket that I did that I was so proud of. I love that. I made it our group picture for a while. And another thing I want to say too about using the burn method and doing it this much, for me, it kind of irritated my sinuses quite a bit, just because you're burning yarn that has dye in it and it has plastic in the middle. So I recommend, if you're going to be doing it a lot, at least well ventilate your room, get a fan going, crack your window if you can. If you live in an area where it's warm, I mean, it's 5 degrees here with snow and ice, so I can't do it outside. Sit outside on your patio and do it, or at very least you might want to wear a mask for part of it, just so you're not breathing that in. A lot of people say it doesn't bother them, but me, after a while of burning all that and inhaling it, I got a sore throat and my sinuses didn't feel too good. So I recommend protecting yourself and well ventilation. Okay, let's get in it. Okay, we're back again. So I wanted to show you one thing before I started the graph that somebody had been asking me about. So I'm, again, with my graph blanket, I wanted to add some color to it before I started the white, which is where the graph starts, with 5 rows of white. So I did 5 rows, not including my cast on, actually 6 of purple. 5 rows of the purple and 5 rows of the gold, which are the colors that are in the flower itself. And people have asked me how I keep my lines so straight as far as when you're changing colors. You can see here that I don't have that like jagged edge look on the side to where it looks like it's uneven, I guess you could call it. What I do is I change colors. When I change colors on a blanket, like even before I changed here, I always drop the end stitch, of course, which means I don't knit my end stitch once for going that way and once for going that way. I knit it for going that way and then I skip it when I come back in the other direction so that it's not getting knitted twice in a row. And then when I go to change colors, instead of knitting here and then knitting another one here like you normally would if you weren't going to switch colors, this is what I would do. Okay, as I knitted it for going that way and then I don't knit it again for going this way, I skip the end stitch and go here and continue on. But since this is my last row, I'm going to undo these. This is my last row of this color and I want to switch to the white. Let's say I'm back a few stitches. Okay, I left off right here. I got to stitch 2 more and then switch to the white. I'm actually only going to stitch 1 more right here. Okay, and I'm going to switch colors here instead of here. Okay, so I cut right behind the stitch, really pretty close to the other stitch, just maybe about 1/4 of an inch when I switch colors. Okay, so I'm going to cut away right there and I'll show you how much. So now I'm switching to my vintage white color. So I have just a little bit sticking out. Okay, and then we are of course going to do the burn method. Let me find my lighter. So I have my trusty candle lighter and my torch lighter. Just in case this runs out of butane, I have this one, or I just feel like using this one. I'll use the candle lighter this time. And again, I will try to always remember to drop links in the comments. I did not have the Bernat Vintage White like I thought, so I just used something very, very close to it. All right, so to burn, you want to make sure, trim off your fuzzies, get a nice... So I'm going to show you the burn method and how to change colors there. So I get a nice flat piece. Okay, I trimmed this one, and inside all yarn that is considered chunky yarn, it has like, I call it like a fishing line inside it. That's what's holding the yarn together. When I burn, I only light on one of them and I do not blow it out. I let it burn for a little bit. You want to try to light it right in the center. Get it lit like a candle. Let it burn for a minute. Hold it over to the other one. So it's kind of catching that one fire and extinguishing itself. Push the two together. Let it sit for a second so you don't burn yourself. It always sticks to my fingernails. Now you want to start squishing and squishing it together and flattening out that sharp piece, which is also going to attach it. I squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. You'll feel like a little ball in there. And you should be able to flatten that little ball. And then I turn it sideways like that and squeeze those two pieces together again. So you know you got a good connection. All right, now I test it. If it breaks, I'm going to redo it. I pull and pull and pull and pull and pull and make sure my blanket's not ever going to come apart, especially when you're putting all this effort into a graph blanket. Okay, so now when I knit my next color, it is going to line up. See, right here, sorry, you'll see on the side here, it lines up. Okay, I got a nice smooth straight line all the way across. No dip on the side. And I'll show you this after I knit back and forth a couple rows. All right, I am going to go ahead and quickly knit my 2 rows, or 3 I decided. I always keep my graph next to me, the flower, and I keep the color block line that she did in all my notes. Always keep notes on every blanket that you did so you can come back and look at them later when you're trying to figure out how much yarn you need of what brand for what size blanket. So I wrote down here, you know, how many rows I'm actually going to do of each color. And I crossed out you know, the first 3 rows of the white. And I'm only going to do 2 rows of white before I start my actual flower pattern. So I won't bore you with that. I'm just going to say keep your stitches small. I believe mine came out to be about 1 inch. Let's measure here. Or sorry, actually you should go from the side. Mine come to about 1.5 inches. Okay, and that should be good. I wouldn't go any bigger than that. You might even want to go a little smaller for graph blankets. Okay, I'll come back after I've knitted my 2 rows. Okay, I'm back. I knitted my 2 rows of the off-white color, ivory, and I am going to start at row 6 because on the graph pattern, that's the bottom of the flower. That's where my first color changing part of the graph is. And luckily I added this up right because I wasn't thinking that that's a right to left row according to the pattern, the color block pattern that I showed you in the previous part of the video. Again, if you're doing these, making your own, once you get good at them, you won't have to follow that exactly. And again, I also added the color rows before that also. So I've got 20 on my cast on and 5, actually 6 rows if you count the cast on row with purple, and 5 rows of this, of the gold, and then 2 rows of the off-white. And then I'm going to start my pattern. So I look at my instruction sheet here, and it says that row, I start crossing them off as I go, sorry. So I know I've done all of these rows now, and I'm on row 6. My first color changing row is 9 stitches of ivory and 2 stitches of amethyst and 9 more of the ivory. And yes, I'm sorry, I will change the names of these colors 100 times. But you get it. Ivory, off-white, vintage white, all the same thing. Amethyst, winter grape, purple, they're all the same thing. This one I always call gold. Okay, so I'm going to go 9, 2, 9. 9 off-white, 2 purple, and 9 off-white. So, and you count your end stitch. This is 1, even though I don't knit my end stitch a second time coming this way, I still have to count that because that's 1 of my 20. So 1, 2, remember it's 9, 2, 9, 3, 4, 5. You want to definitely have this laying out flat on a table. I don't always knit at a table because I have a really bad back and hips. So I like to knit in bed, but I don't do that if I'm doing a graph blanket. I make sure to sit at a table. All right, lost count. So 1 for the end stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now it is time to switch to purple. So I'm going to cut right behind my stitch, just like I did before. Leave my vintage white sitting there, or ivory. Grab my purple. Keep all 3 colors close to you because you'll be switching quite a bit. The purple has already been cut once, so that should be good to go. And I just kind of peel away some of the fuzzies so it don't light up a big old fire. Together. Try to keep your fingernail back away from it. You will develop calluses from the burning quite a bit, so massage that really good. With this many color changes, you really got to make sure that you connect your burns really good. You don't want your blanket falling apart. I've yet to wash a graph blanket, so I'm not sure. Maybe somebody from the group has that you can ask. Okay, so 9, then 2, purple, and then you get fast at cutting and burning. Back to white. Keep your ends right close to you. You don't want to cut back too much of these fuzzies because you want to be able to hide the connection, especially with the white. Sometimes if you do it, bear it back too much, you'll see the burn mark. You don't want that. Just push them together. Start squeezing. You can get those fingertip protectors at the craft stores that I use for when I'm doing hot glue, and put those on when you're doing this. They're hard to knit with them on, but if you want to hurry up and throw one on every time you burn, that helps a lot. But check your connection always. So 9, 2. Now I should have 9 left, hopefully. I want to make sure that I don't have too much purple back here, that it shows through when I go to knit. See? I can see it. Let me show you up closer. See that little bit of purple sticking out? I don't like that. So I'm going to try to just make my stitches a little bigger so I don't have to cut and burn again, because I've just got a little bit too much purple. And you should know when you look at the back of it, there's only a little bit of purple behind there. You'll be all right. There. Now, see, no purple showing on my white there. Perfect. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Over for you. 6, 7, 8, and 9. Again, I count my end stitch, even though I'm not going to stitch it again coming back this way. I don't like how my loops turned out right here. I'm going to just kind of adjust those a little as I go. Stretch them a little bit. Okay, so mark off that row, and this will get faster as you go. Now my next row says it's a left to right row, and it says 8 for 8. 8 ivory for purple and 8 again of the ivory. So I'm going to leave this ivory on and count this as 1, even though I'm not going to knit it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I will upload this graph to my graph album in my group. In the Chunky Yarn Blanketeers group, we share all of our graphs also. So if we purchase one from Dawn, after we buy it, we upload it. And then that way we don't have to buy the same one twice, and then we all share them. And there's probably 40 or 50 of them in there already. And people upload some that they make of their own. There's some pretty great ones in there. Okay, so I did 8. We're on the second row. So if you want to, while you're watching this video, go and print this graph first so you can see what I'm doing. It'll make more sense to you. I would drop the link, but you have to be a member of the group to get to the link. But it's really easy to get in the group. There's a couple of questions you have to answer to get in, just like any other Facebook group. Use my torch lighter that time because it's the purple. Put them together. I did a really nice Rudolph blanket. You'll be able to see that one. that I had Dawn make the graph for that. And it was kind of a complicated one, lots of color changes, but I loved it. Now that one, I didn't wash it, but boy, we sure did use it a lot at Christmas time. It really got a lot of kids fighting over it and back and forth and stretching and pulling on it, and it did not lose its picture. I was very, very shocked that Rudolph's head didn't get all twisted up. I always have too much stuff in front of me. My camera stand is like right here, so I don't have a lot of room. 3. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see, it's starting to shape the bottom part of the flower. And then I should have 8 white left. I always check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just keep always count when you're doing a graph blanket. And don't let people in your house distract you a lot, like happens here. It gets pretty busy sometimes. This white is not Bernat. This ivory, I'm sorry. I don't know what brand it is. I'm thinking I bought it offline, and it's just not the best. It's not as thick and fluffy as my yarn. My yarn is the best, of course. But I don't have these colors yet. See, it's stuck to my finger. Make sure. This is what takes the longest, is the burning. You got to make sure that, every stitch connects. So, but you get faster at it, and you just kind of can tell by tugging it if it's got a good connection or not. So don't get discouraged if it takes you 5,000 hours, it feels like, to do one of these. Just start out with this, simple pattern like this one that doesn't have a lot of color changes, and you'll be so happy. You can just do one with letters on it, like somebody's name or initial on the bottom. Those are really easy and fun. People love to have their own personalized blankets, especially kids, because they can't say it's, brother can't say it's his blanket when it belongs to sister. My yarn always gets my hair wrapped in it, so if you see me tugging and pulling all the time, me and my daughter both have insanely thick hair, and we also have a Persian cat, so I'm always making sure that I do this on a wood table and that I don't, I clean it real good, make sure there's not any hair or anything, but it's in the air. Anyways, I got ahead of myself and forgot to mark that row off, and now I'm back to going right to left, and the next row is the same. It's 8, 4, 8. So it's the same as this one. So we can just copy the row that we just did. So if you get the gist of it and you don't want to watch anymore, it's really not necessary. I'm just going to do a few more rows, and then I'm going to stop and come back and show you what it looks like when we're done. You're just going to cast off the same way you would any other blanket. Again, try to stick with the knit stitch unless you're doing like a square or rectangular shaped pattern. Then you could try the herringbone if you want, but it just looks better with the knit stitch. And then I'll try to remember to flip it over and show you the back so you can see what it would look like if it was purled, because a purl stitch is just the back side of a knit stitch. So if I do forget and you want to see it, just comment or come to the group and ask me, and I'll get you a picture of what the back of the blanket looks like. Alright. Okay. So this one was 4. Oh, I can see white. I don't like that. I'm going to make that stitch a little bigger so that it uses up more yarn. When I pulled that through, I could see some white from where it connected. It was sticking to the bottom. Or sticking out the bottom, sorry. It's late. I only ever have time usually to knit at night anymore. But it's when I love to knit the most at night because it's very relaxing. It helps me get tired, calm down from my day. Alright, back to the white. So if you have sensitive sinuses, like I said before, or you're not in a well-ventilated area, you might want to wear a mask if you're going to be burning a lot. This one's not too bad. I'm not going to wear a mask because there's not a whole lot of burning. And it's very dry and cold where I live right now, so this burning tends to really irritate my sinuses and throat. But since there's not that many color changes, yeah, and I'm in a big room, I think I'll be okay. That Rudolph blanket really got me at winter time though. Alright, see, I can see that I made that one a little too long and that it's going to show through. So I'm immediately going to back that stitch out and make that previous one bigger and make this one a little bigger. Just so it doesn't show through. You don't want a big old chunk of purple sticking out. Alright, I'll do one more row to show you what the next one looks like, and then I'll come back and show you the finished project. I might try to show you like right in the middle too, just to give you an idea. But really, it's just follow it line by line. I can't say enough good things about the way Dawn does her graphs because they make it so much easier for a beginner especially to do these graph blankets. I did one without having her instruction sheet and it was not fun. Okay, so now just make sure you cross off your rows on your sheet of paper as you're going, so that you know how many to knit. Okay, so I did 3 total rows with purple in it. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I know I'm on the 4th row, and this one has a lot of color changes. Again, I know I'm over here, so I'm going left to right, and this says left to right on the paper, so I know I'm correct. So now this one is like 4, 3, 1, 4, 1, 3, 4. So this one I'm gonna like cross off each group of stitches as I go because I've done the bottom part of this flower and I'm getting into the part where I've got the other petals. So, it's going to be white and then purple, and then you've got this gap right here of white, and then some purple, and then another gap right here of white and some purple, and then white again. So there's a lot of color changes on this row. So, like on here, sorry, excuse my writing, you can, you see the numbers that she's got. I cross them off as I go. So 4 white, and I'll knit 4 white, and then I cross off the 4 on the sheet, just to keep track of it. So again, the end stitch, you count as 1 even though you're not knitting it. 1, 2, 3, there's 4 white, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this down and over a little bit. And I kind of usually fold my blankets as I go too. So I did 4 white. And I'm going to go over to my paper and cross off the number 4. And then it is 3 purple. It's kind of hard to see because the purple print's over top of it. So 3. You can look at it on your computer screen. You can just go look at your actual picture too. 4, 3. Sorry if this is kind of long. There's just kind of a lot to tell you when it comes to the graph blanket. Again, feel free to come to the group. Ask me questions. There's also a lot of other ladies there that know how to do this. You'll see pictures of some wonderful graph blankets that have been posted. And again, lots of free graphs that you can try. And I can show you how to contact Dawn. Just ask who's the graph lady and one of us will tag her for you. I believe she's going to have her own website soon too, and I will promote her for you. Alright. So again, we were at 3. Because it's the bottom part of the petal. So we're going to go 1, 2, you can even start out with something smaller and even more basic than this if you want. So I did my 3 purple. I'm going to cross that out. Now it's 1 white. Cut real close to the back of the stitch. Light my white on fire. I like to blow the smoke away from my face. I have not heard anybody else in the group ever complain about the burning of the yarn and inhaling all of it bothering them. So it's, again, probably just me, oversensitive sinuses. And there's people that do a lot of these because they're addicting. It's a huge accomplishment feeling when you get one done. You look back at it and think, wow, I made that. Alright, so 1. Cut and burn again. You will have fuzzies everywhere. I usually keep like a little bowl or something here for when I'm trimming the fuzzies off of my pieces. And I keep them like in the bowl and throw them away, or keep a small garbage can next to you, whatever you want to do. This one's really, really fluffy, this purple is. So. I remember when I first seen somebody doing this, I was just like afraid that the blanket could still be singeing inside or something and eventually catch on fire later, but it has never ever happened to any of us, so I think we're pretty safe. Check these, make sure you got a good connection. Alright, so I did the 1 white, cross that off. Now we're at 4 purple again. Got a white spot sticking through. Just going to pull it out the back a little. 4. So many yarn fuzzies from all this cutting. 4. At least it's only 2 colors right now. In the middle of it, you'll see that we're going to have 3 colors. Sometimes this yarn just does not want to light. And then I'll light the other side too if I feel like I didn't get it melted good enough. Alright, cross out that I did 4. And I've got 1 white. I'm going to go ahead and cross that one off too because I know that I'll remember that at least. So when you go to push your stitch through, if you see some of the purple color coming out with it, then you just back it out and make the previous one shorter. Alright. Keep getting all my fuzzies off. And back. Don't get your fingers too close to the end of the yarn, or you will light it on fire. And I don't recommend wearing fake nails when you do this too, because I had some on once when I was burning and it lit that acrylic nail right up. It was pretty scary. So just, you know, don't do ignorant things like I do and be a little protective. We're grown-ups. I think we can handle a little bit of fire. Nothing better than a bonfire. Okay, check my sheet and my last color change here in the purple. All right, 3. This is the bottom part of the petal. 1, 2, 3. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left. Let's see if the last box is 4. Yep, 4 white. All right, so I'm going to switch back to white. Or ivory, vintage white, whatever you want to call it. You can also tell Dawn what colors you're going to use when you order your graph. Every graph she does is custom for you. So tell her what colors you're going to use and what brand you're going to use, and she will print that out for you. It just makes it so much easier. Massage that so you don't get those little sharp pieces inside there. And I don't ever notice them, but some people do if they're going to sleep with it. I would say these graph blankets are more decorative, is what I would tell people if you're selling them, because if they get a lot of wear, I would think that the picture might start to pull out a little bit. So here's the last row I'm going to do with you, and then I'll come back and show you when it's done. See, I'm not changing colors at the end, so that's why I'm not doing what I showed you down here earlier. All right, so you can see my stitches all curl up like that. I know a lot of people have asked about that in the group. It's normal, it really is, because we're making them so small. If you were making big giant loops, they would lay flat, but just go ahead and press them down. Always make sure that you're not going to miss a loop. But, I mean, you can kind of see now we have the bottom ridge of the flower. So I'm just going to keep following my line by line instructions and knitting away, and I'll come back. We're back. Okay, I worked all night and got this graph blanket done. Well, got the graph part done. So I showed you from the beginning that I started out with my 5 rows of color. I wanted to put the same colors that were going to be in the graph, the purple and the gold, or amethyst and gold. So I did 5 rows of each. And this is what our picture looked like. Okay, so I got the graph part done. And this is how we are looking. Isn't that beautiful? As you can see, I still have to add the rest of the color to the bottom. And then you will just cast it off like you do a normal blanket. Oh, I did say I would show you the other side. Let's see. Some graphs will actually look okay on the other side, and they'll still look like the original pattern. Others, it'll be kind of hard to figure out if it's a letter. But this one actually looks pretty good on both sides, I think. Not too bad, not too bad. I still haven't defuzzed it, so there's still a lot of lint from me cutting and burning so much. But overall, this was probably one of the easier graph blankets that I've done. There wasn't a lot of color change to it. The graph itself, again, was 20 stitches cast on, and she had it graphed out at 20 by 34, so 34 rows long. I took off some rows of the white because I was adding the color, and I didn't want the blanket to be extremely long. I like it to be proportionate to its width. So let's see what I ended up with. Cast on 20 stitches. I'm gonna end up with 50 rows when I'm done, when I add the color back to the end. And it's gonna be the thumbnail of this video, so what you see in the thumbnail is gonna be the finished product. And it's going to measure 34 by 55. So my math for cast on to figure out the width of your blanket is usually the number of stitches that you cast on times 1.5 to 1.7, depending on how you knit. I tried to knit this one tighter than I normally do just because it's a graph blanket. So 20 times 1.5 would be about 30. And this came out to be 30, what did I say? 34. So it was 20 times 1.7, which came to 34 wide. And it stayed perfectly square. It didn't bow out or anything because I cast it on big enough. Again, I did 2.5 finger cast on stitches for this size because it was only 20 cast on. anything wider, I would have did at least 3 so it didn't, you know, start to curl up on the end or bow out like that. So I think that's probably everything you need for now. Come to the group again, ask away. There's so many of us in there that love to do these and so many people that can help, and lots of great grafts for you to choose from, or you can contact our graft lady and she will make you just about anything you can put on one of these and fit on a blanket. She can do it. And again, the more you practice them, the easier they'll get. This one was nothing. It didn't take me much at all. But you could start off with just like a letter, you know, an initial or something in the beginning, and that would be a lot easier for you. So I'm gonna get started on my next video for you. So have a ball.